been at the forefront of the internet in Lithuania, way back in Web 0.0. So this is definitely a very interesting person. So this was very nice way for me to start. On the formal side, since the 1990s, Aldus has been very involved in some of the most interesting tech and internet stories in this region. Probably many of you know the company Metasite. He co-founded Metasite and then went on to work with Forticom, which was one of the top 3 global social networking firms, which then merged into Mail.ru with a $2 billion valuation. So a pretty impressive exit on there as well. Aldus has also co-founded Cherry Media, which some of you might know, and it's one of the leading consumer e-commerce players in the Baltics. Aldus has also been an early investor in Exacaster, so big data, and I think he's going to talk a little bit about that today as well. And Aldus is currently sitting on the board of a number of companies and continues to advise on tech startups. So let me hand over to Aldus to talk us through his presentation, and then we'll come back on for some questions. So once again, feel free to send any questions in to questions@teo.lt. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Aldo Kirvaičio.
Thank you. Hello. All right, you see my face has just changed a little bit. Okay. So I'm Aldo Kirvaičio. I've been building tech and internet companies for almost 20 years, and Alex had just covered my next slide, so I won't be repeating that. Basically listing like the more interesting companies that I've been involved with. And so let's cut to the chase. What keeps me up at night? What keeps us up at night? I mean, there are of course different things. There are things which are generic to everyone. Right. So whatever threat is coming from the east, or whatever is happening with the refugee crisis, right, or the climate change, which is screwing up our environment, or isn't. There is a debate about that, but not much debate left, right? Or Zika virus, not here yet, but yeah, maybe something like that will appear over time. So plenty of problems to lose your sleep about, but at the same time, well, there are some magical things going on. Some of that we have already listened to. I'll just reiterate some of the things here. We are building self-driving cars. We are learning to 3D print human organs. We are sending a fleet of microchips to the stars. We may be the first generation that will never die. And we are creating a god, or perhaps a multitude of gods, by developing artificial intelligence that will soon surpass our own. And we don't yet know if it will like us. So it's an exciting world, it's a dangerous world, it's rapidly but unevenly accelerating world, and things will almost surely become even more interesting. They may also become more worse before they become much better. This is more or less like the line, the vertical line here is where I imagine we are with the technological progress, and so it's going to get really interesting. It may also get a little bit messy, and unfortunately there's going to be a bloodbath or two, either in business or even in real world, driven by the technological progress. So what strategies should our companies adopt to survive and win in this unevenly accelerating world? And what strategies should each of us choose personally to survive and win? And what should we be teaching our kids to prepare them for this new world? And I cannot offer you definitive answers, but I can raise some questions and I can give you some warnings connected to some trends that I believe are important. So let's look at the first trend, which would be about, well, accelerating the digitalization of services, evolving digitalization of services, how it changes customer experience and expectations, and what does it mean for our businesses. So this chart here is stolen from our annual presentation on internet trends done by famous internet analyst Mary Meeker. It shows in numbers the trend which we all know, meaning that people are increasingly attached to their smartphones, especially the millennial generation. 87% of them claim that smartphone never leaves their side. 60% believe that in the next 5 years everything will be done on mobile devices. Indeed, it is obvious by now, so our smartphones have become our remote control for more and more things in this world. Not only we expect our smartphones to help us, well, read the news, check the weather forecast, listen to the music we like, find our way home, or to an unknown place, book a flight or a hotel room. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is just a list of what I'm using my smartphone for, and I'm sure that you are using it for some other applications or some other uses. But we also get annoyed and angry when this doesn't work, even if for a very, very brief moment. So for our magical remote control to work, we need to always be connected, and we absolutely really don't care how as consumers. Similar to tap water or electricity, we only remember mobile internet connectivity when it stops working. But more importantly, not only do we need to be connected at all times, but we also expect all the digital services to look great and work flawlessly. In a way, we have been spoiled by the companies providing the best digital user experience. For instance, the example here, it's Expedia, although some of you may be using Booking.com. Both those apps allow us to book hotel rooms basically with a few clicks and a single swipe, which is a radical departure from the experience that similar hotel booking websites were providing like 5 or 10 years ago. Or Spotify music app, which allows us to switch from listening music on our smartphone on the way home to blasting it from the speakers of our home entertainment system without even having to really change or reset anything. The music just picks up on the new device where it stopped on the old one. And so it's nothing short of magical, it just works. So our expectations that we can get what we want with ease and speed will definitely continue to rise. And we increasingly hold all digital services to the same high standard dictated by the user experience leaders. This is great for us as consumers, but this is also a mortal threat for many businesses, and this is why. In the digital world, the service with the best user experience basically wins. The global players with the most resources will always create the best user experience, and the local players, if they are competing with them head-to-head, will lose. How many have you tried using Uber? And I'm not sure whether you haven't been asked already that today, but let's do it again. So, how many of you have actually tried using Uber either in Lithuania or in any other country? Raise your hands. Okay, so it's I would say it's a hefty 25% and it's growing, especially given that Uber has been in Lithuania just since February. So I have a confession to make. I don't have a driver's license. I never had one. And for the last 20 years, I've been riding everywhere in taxis every day, until 2 months ago. Now I'm riding everywhere in Ubers. Why? In Vilnius, Uber is already better than any of the taxi services I have been using, and trust me, I know. I don't use any other mode of transportation. So I tap my iPhone, a clean car arrives in 5 to 7 minutes on average. I get into the car, it takes me where I need to go, I get out, no fumbling with cash, no signing of receipts, no nothing, business card gets charged automatically, I get an invoice via email in the end of the month. And this will get better. In London, Uber arrives in 2 to 3 minutes on the average. And I can choose what music will be playing in the car when it arrives, and I'm sure that that's just basically the start of the services that they're gonna bundle with this thing. Okay, you'll say, but there are local competitors like Taxify, well, which is not entirely local, let's say it's regional, or TaxiLT, which is entirely homegrown, and there are a few others, I won't be naming them, this is just for the sake of the argument. Surely they are as good as Uber. The answer is, unfortunately, as much as I hate to tell it, no. It is all about the tiny details in the user experience, and regional or local players will never be able to match the quality of user experience provided by Uber because they will never have as much resources for developing that experience. This is a simple example, simple illustration of user experience details that matter. When you start using any app for hailing cabs or for hailing taxis, when you have to register your credit card. So with Taxify, what you do is you have to enter your credit card number by hand. It doesn't take very long, it takes maybe 15 to 20 seconds, but you have to key every numeral by hand. With Uber, what you do is you just take a photo of your credit card and it recognizes and fills in the number automatically, and it just takes under 1 second. It is with a growing number of such small user experience differences that Uber wins. So Uber's iPhone and Android apps are being constantly polished and improved by an army of designers and developers, the best in the world. And we know that they have an office in Lithuania, so they employ something like, I don't know how many, 20, 30 people here. They are recruiting more, they're going to have maybe 40. They have other offices in other countries where more developers and more designers and more scientists are sitting, perfecting their service. The driver allocation and route optimization algorithms are being constantly refined by an army of mathematicians, data scientists, and software engineers. And also they are able to hire the best in the world. They can afford it. They have raised billions of dollars in funding, and they are spending a meaningful part of that on actually developing their digital user experience. And again, as much as I hate to say it, local players like Taxify or TaxiLT or any others will never have such resources. They may crudely replicate the service model, but when it comes to small details that ultimately make all the difference, their apps will always be tiny bit less polished, less easy to use, less pretty, and the algorithms ultimately will be a little bit less efficient. And this will eventually kill them, unless the government, of course, intervenes and starts protecting them with regulation. But I'm not going to go and explore that direction. This may happen in certain industries. So if you think this example applies only to Uber, you are wrong. Global digital platforms are rapidly emerging in a variety of industries, so it is definitely worth looking around and checking if the same is not about to happen in your industry sector. Expedia and Booking.com already killed off all local hotel reservation systems pretty much. Spotify, if it manages to become profitable soon enough, will kill all local and regional online music services. Well, maybe not Apple, but that's pretty much it. Amazon will eventually kill PiguLT and other local copycats. And this is unfortunately also inevitable. And this is just the beginning. There are plenty of industries which provide really bad digital user experiences and which will be disrupted by global platforms as soon as national governments stop artificially protecting them with regulation and boundaries. Retail banking actually is one of them. How many of you have used internet banking over the last month? It's a simple question. Raise your hands. Pretty much everyone. How many of you have visited a physical bank branch over the last month? Very few of you. So obviously, that digital user experience has become the most important thing for most of customers of retail banking. I was among the first 100 people to start using e-banking in Lithuania almost 20 years on. I can tell you, e-banking absolutely sucks. It hasn't really evolved much at all. Now, in order to pay my heating bill, which in itself takes just a few seconds with e-invoices, right, I firstly have to waste over a minute just to connect to my e-banking system, entering usernames and passwords. And I'm using a mobile signature, actually. How many of you are using mobile signatures? Please raise your hands. Okay, that's a good crowd. But I guess when I come to think of it, that comes naturally with so many CEOs here who have to sign various kinds of official documents and public tenders, right? So for the rest of you who don't use mobile signatures, connecting to an e-bank probably takes even longer than a minute. So why can't we always be logged in the way it is with Google? Why can't we use a fingerprint instead of a password? So, I mean, this is no longer 1998, but with e-banking, I mean, it still feels like it is 1998. It hasn't really changed that much at all. So now, how many of you are using Gmail for private emails? Raise your hands. Very good. If Google or Uber would start offering e-banking services that would be as easy to use as Gmail or an Uber app, would you consider switching? I've done actually a poll at my office, and majority of our employees said that they would consider switching. Imagine that. And I can assure you that user experience provided by Google's e-banking service will be far smoother and far more efficient and far easier to use than any regional or local bank could offer, because Google is a global platform and it will be able to invest billions of dollars into refinement of its e-banking platform and of the user experience it provides. The same will happen probably with insurance. Again, imagine Google being your insurance company with all the knowledge that they have about you, with all the Google apps in your pocket. I mean, they could be advising you to slow down where accidents have been happening more frequently lately while you're driving around, or they could just basically be slowing you down. Well, of course, cars will be driving themselves anyway soon, so this may not even be a relevant example. So that's my first half-baked strategic advice. If your business can be globalized and digitized, it will be. Start pouring resources into development of a world-class digital user experience, paying attention to all the details, all the tiny nooks and crannies, and it has to be a continuous process. Or, if you're not able to do that or not willing to do that, just get out of the way and just don't try to compete with the global guys. There are always services which will not have global competitors. There, a user experience which sucks may actually survive for a longer time. But as Uber example shows, I mean, sometimes you can get a hit in an industry which never really expected to be hit, as it was, I think, with the Lithuanian taxi drivers. Yeah, and so basically, yeah, the global platforms will crush you through their better UX, better optimized business logic, and predictive and AI powers, which brings me to the second question, which previous lecturer just touched on very briefly. That is rapid rise of artificial intelligence capabilities and what it means for our businesses and for our children. So, as it was mentioned, I am one of the founders of Exacaster, which is a big data predictive analytics technology company. So our claim to fame so far is that our platform is used to predict individual behaviors of over 20 million consumers. And we work mostly with telecommunications providers, and we have clients all over the globe, from United States to Belgium and to exotic countries like Paraguay, Honduras, or Colombia, where we are actually rolling out our service right now. So what do we do for our clients? Fairly simple things. So it's our machine learning-based algorithms. They can automatically plan and execute optimal promotion campaigns. They can dynamically change prices for individual products in e-commerce stores. They can automatically identify potential churners for telecom service providers. But when you really look into what we really do, is basically we replace middle managers, certain middle managers, with increasingly intelligent algorithms. Exacaster is not the only one Baltic company building artificial intelligence-based products and solutions. There are more. Another example would be Clientech, which is a Latvian company building artificial intelligence-based automated inspection solutions for transport and security industries. And they install camera systems that read cargo numbers from train cars and containers, detect oversized or damaged cargo, and it basically gets processed and acted upon automatically. Or near entrance to Jurmala, their systems recognize vehicle types, read license plates, and detects whether the driver has obtained a toll permit to enter town or not. So it's amazing technology, and it also replaces human workers. So if you think that the just described cases of artificial intelligence usage are insignificant, consider this. You have all been hearing about self-driving cars and warehouse robots. Today, over 100,000 people in Lithuania are employed in the transportation and storage and, well, associated security sectors in Lithuania. Driving trucks, loading cargoes, managing warehouses. And guess what will happen to all these people in the near future when computers start driving trucks, inspecting cargoes, drawing routes, and managing warehouses? And it is happening. Like a dozen trucks from major manufacturers like Volvo or Daimler just completed a week of largely autonomous driving across Europe. So it's not just the taxi drivers who are going to be displaced with private self-driving cars. I think that as much as Lithuania is concerned, Lithuanian economy is concerned, self-driving trucks are going to have a way, way bigger impact, because we don't really know who is going to be owning the companies with the autonomous trucks. So, this will happen sooner than we all think, and it has been said that the greatest failing of the human mind is the inability to understand the exponential function. People tend to think in terms of linear change. Basically, we see a linear line here. So any progress that happens along an exponential curve feels slower than expected and quite disappointing in the early phase. Then suddenly it accelerates, and for a moment everyone is excited. Then after a bit it starts going up really, really fast, and everyone is first surprised, then terrified. And this is happening now with artificial intelligence, and it will be the single most important change this century. At least that's what I believe. So comparative advantage of humans over software has been steadily eroding, and machines and their learning-based algorithms have leaped forward in pattern matching ability and in nuances of interpreting and communicating complex information. Already, many of the jobs that had once seemed the sole province of humans, including those of pathologists, petroleum geologists, or law clerks, are now being performed by computers. In the United Kingdom, the Parliament has launched an inquiry into robotics and artificial intelligence with the goal to assess the implications of robotics and artificial intelligence on the future UK's workforce and job market, and the government's preparation for the shift in the UK skills base and training that this may require. I'll skip through this, but basically it's a quote which says that, yeah, robots are now beating humans, and we really need to be prepared as a country. By now, most of us have realized that our cars will be driving themselves within a decade. Most of us probably can imagine robots laying bricks or grilling hamburgers. But what about the so-called knowledge workers and creative professions? So, do they see the rise of artificial intelligence as a threat or as an opportunity? And I just love this bricklaying robot video. It's very relaxing. Whenever I'm like really exhausted at the end of the day, I just launch it on YouTube and watch it for 5 minutes. So, I've decided to ask around, and I started with my lawyer, which I promise is a little bit slower talker than myself.
Mr. Markauskas, do you see a future where legal contracts would be written in software code rather than natural language?
What we usually do, we are trying to find compromise, or we are writing into agreement compromise which was reached by two different parties, and this is very subjective work, which requires to make some very nice human decisions, which would be difficult to imagine being done by the machine, by the software or by the robot or whatever. We look at this. So I think that it would be difficult to eliminate a human factor from the legal profession and from the laws. Because there is another problem that the laws sometimes are not, you cannot put them into mathematical formula, because it is a matter of interpretation, it is a matter of the case law, that means how the court treats the law, and so on. So I think these are the challenges which would be very much difficult to overcome by the machine. So the human being is still necessary in our profession. On the other hand, I should say that nowadays we work with a lot of different information, a lot of different databases, a lot of different case law, and it is getting more and more difficult to analyze all this this flow which we have. And for this, sometimes we need an external help, which is being done by the machine. And today we have different software which can dig out in the databases, dig out in the information we have, and produce certain results and even make certain conclusions. Of course, these conclusions are usually not the final ones. Still, human factor is necessary to make a final result. Nevertheless, I think this is already a step of using a little bit of artificial intellect in our very conservative profession.
So lawyers are already using AIs to speed up legal research and document discovery, but so far we don't quite see a future where people would fully entrust machines with writing and interpreting legal agreements for them. How about the potential of AI to take over some other highly creative professions? I turned with similar question to Sigita Norvilute, an award-winning architect living in Vilnius.
Ms. Norvilute, with artificial intelligences becoming more and more powerful, do you see a future where machines could become capable of designing buildings and eventually replace human architects?
One has to differentiate between landmark buildings such as hotels, residences and museums, and utilitarian structures such as warehouses, logistics centers, and even suburban shopping malls. And for landmark buildings, beauty matters as much as functionality. And at the moment, I don't really see as humans trusting artificial intelligences with generating designs for buildings that are supposed to tell a story and to trigger certain human emotions. No one really has a formula for human psychology, and thus no one knows how to instruct a computer to design a building that would inspire people to be better, just as we don't know how to instruct a computer to write a symphony that would rival Beethoven's. In design of utilitarian buildings, however, form usually follows function, and utilitarian buildings are usually not supposed to be inspirational. And I truly do not see any good reason why designs for utilitarian structures could not be fully or at least partly generated by sufficiently sophisticated computer programs, which could factor in all the variables that a human architect factors in today. That is, all data about site area, 3D site scan for landscaping, estimated data about future transport flows, soil characteristic, permitted site floor area, height restriction, etc. There is a myriad of variables to factor in, but if all of them are digitized, one could expect that a computer could actually be somewhat better than a human at keeping track of all those variables and all restrictions, all regulations, and integrating all of them without mistakes, then generating candid building designs. And with a rollout of building information management systems, more and more of those variables are getting digitized, so we are definitely on this path already. One of the mandatory preconditions for AIs to be able to design buildings, however, would be that all the building laws, regulations, and standards are also available in a machine-readable form and are precisely expressed. In other words, building laws and regulations would have to be written in code, and the code itself would have to be free of errors or contradictions. I don't know when this could realistically happen.
Okay, so buildings that don't need to inspire, like warehouses or logistics centers, could be designed by machines in the near future. But firstly, laws and regulations would have to be rewritten in machine-readable code. So how likely is this to happen? So with this last question, I turn to a representative of another highly creative profession, to a parliament member.
Mr. Landsbergis, do you see a future where our laws and regulations would be written in code readable to artificial intelligences?
Hello, my name is Gabrielius Landsbergis. I'm a member of European Parliament from Lithuania, and I was asked to say a few words about the lawmaking and artificial intelligence. Firstly, I have to say that many politicians, myself included, we are not digital natives. One could even say that we're digital savages. That means that we more often break technology than make use of it. Whenever we are asked to talk about the technology that is still in the making, it's very difficult to comprehend on how we could use it, because we don't have a reference point in the reality. Same would have happened if in the end of the 19th century we've been asked to build highways for the cars that didn't exist back then. If we talk about the lawmaking in the current days and the artificial intelligence, I could use a few examples. Firstly, if we would talk about the big things like constitutions and the laws that handle this, how society works, I think the human factor is invaluable. The Constitution of the United States is just 4 pages long. That means that the human interpretation is the key element on how to read the Constitution and how to apply it in real life. But I could say that there are regulations that could be handled simply by the artificial intelligence. Let's say, for example, when to turn on the heating in the municipality. For example, in Vilnius, politicians still have to vote for that, even though it could be easily handled by the thermostat, which is a simple example of artificial intelligence. My belief is that going further into the 21st century, we will see a division of the laws that could be handled easier and could be handled easier by the artificial intelligence, and the ones that I think will forever stay in the hands of the humans.
Okay, so even lawmakers don't rule out that machines could eventually be writing some subset of our laws and regulations. But can artificial intelligence substitute for the responsibilities of senior managers in the roles at the top of today's corporations? Well, the answer, of course, is twofold. In some activities, particularly when it comes to finding answers to problems, software already surpasses even the best managers. But this so far is in fairly narrow, I would say, our collection of domains or collection of roles. But what is fast becoming a critical executive skill is knowing whether to assert your own expertise or to step out of the way and basically give way to, well, data-driven decisions or artificial intelligence-driven decisions. So what should top managers do in that sense? Well, firstly, I believe we all need to stop assuming that the AI revolution will not affect our particular business or our particular industry. It will. Secondly, we all need to start learning about this. I mean, and when I'm saying us, well, I don't have in mind like your IT department or just like the guys like sitting somewhere in the corner. I mean, this is a C-level, let's say, executive level, our topic and executive level question. So read up on, at least on the general level, about things like robotic process automation. Familiarize yourselves with basic concepts of predictive analytics. And actually, I'll be putting a reading list after this presentation on kirvaitis.net, which is actually a one-page website just dedicated for this particular, like the talk and the notes coming from it. So you don't have to take notes, just note the URL. And form a habit to base your decisions on data. Because once you form a habit to base your decisions on data, it will be much easier for you to understand how a robot or an artificial intelligence would be making decisions based on data. If you're making most of your decisions or some of your key decisions just based on intuition, it's very hard for you to understand how a robot could replace you, and then it might come completely at a surprise. So you want to be in control of that process. And thirdly, once you learned a bit about how artificial intelligence is used in your particular industry, and nowadays it's really easy to Google these kinds of stories, start looking for opportunities to do the same in your company. Start small and learn. And which brings me to the third and last topic of a little bit of learning. This is my son here, the youngest one, who actually happens to go by the name of Theodore or Theo, I think in homage to this event. So in this rapidly accelerating world, are what should we be teaching our kids to future-proof them? Well, 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said, well, aside from English, my son probably should learn to speak Chinese, because China is going to be a huge market and blah, 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 and all that. And if he wants to have a future-proof profession, it's not like he's going to be listening to me, but if he listened to me, I would say, yeah, he should probably study software engineering or a similar profession. I no longer think this strategy is great. Already today, and it was just mentioned in the previous presentation, products like Skype offer real-time speech translation. It is not yet perfect. It's going to be perfect in 5 to 10 years, probably much sooner. I still think sometimes in linear terms, just as we all do. And by the time my son finishes school, automatic speech translators will be small enough to be invisible and good enough to make learning foreign languages essentially unnecessary. How about software engineering as a profession? Well, the answer here is a little bit less simple. I believe that within 10 to 15 years from now, most of software development will be done by artificial intelligences. As much as I hate to admit that, being basically at the helm of a sizable software development company. So it is doubtful that in 10 to 15 years, software engineering will still be such a lucrative profession as it is today. But there is another angle to this. The great Pablo Picasso once said, "Computers are useless, they can only give you answers." Well, answers do have some value, I believe, but what I think Pablo was trying to stress was that being able to ask the right questions is very frequently more important. And that skill is going to be very important going forward and will require both technical skills and domain knowledge. I'd like you to meet Stephen Wolfram here. He's a British scientist known for his work in computer science, mathematics, and in theoretical physics. And he's also an author of Mathematica package, Wolfram Alpha computational search engine, which probably none of you use directly. But if any one of you is using Siri as part of your iPhone, so basically most of the answers that Siri gives you are computed by Wolfram Alpha computational search engine, which was designed by Stephen Wolfram. He likes to name things in his own name. And he's also the author of Wolfram language. So one of the things that Wolfram has been asking us and ourselves was, we've got these great artificial intelligences and they're able to execute on goals. How do we tell them what to do? One answer to this could be, just talk to them like you talk to Siri or to your colleagues or to a call center operator or whoever you're talking to. So we are understanding the natural language of human utterances and we are doing something based on those utterances. It's a pretty successful way to communicate, to use natural language. But when you want to say something longer and more complicated, it doesn't really work very well. So how do we talk to artificial intelligences? When it comes to describing more sophisticated things, we don't have a good way to describe those things with human natural language. But what we can do is we can build new languages that do describe that. Think about this, like 500 years ago, only scribes and a small set of the population were literate and could write natural language. Being a scribe was a profession. Today, a small fraction of the population can write code. And most of the code they can write is for computers only. You don't understand things by reading code. And code writing is a profession. We call those people computer programmers, software developers, or simply coders, obviously, as we all know. What would the world look like when most people could write code? So what Stephen Wolfram has been trying to do is build this knowledge-based language, a language that could be easily understood both by humans and by machines. And the result, predictably, is Wolfram language, because he likes to name things after himself. This is how it looks, basically. That's the logo, and here's a bit of a glimpse, basically, how visual it is. So it is a language which is pretty much complete. It's actually based on something that Wolfram has been working on for 30 years, and it's not just himself. He actually has a huge company which has been producing various software packages. So it's powerful enough to build really complex systems, but it's also easy enough so that even a 12-year-old can learn it. So my 12-year-old oldest daughter is learning it already, and so I am. And I believe that by learning a knowledge-based programming language, like Wolfram language, we will be better equipped to live in a world where once we can describe what we want to do, more and more things will get done automatically. So basically that's my first prescription. Don't waste time learning Chinese. If you really have the time, and you should spend time on this, learn a knowledge-based programming language. Let's sum it up, because I think that my time is also running out. Are 3 strategies. First one, if your business can be globalized and digitized, it will be, and start pouring resources into development of a world-class digital user experience, or just get out of the way and do something else, as the global platforms will come and crush you. The second thing, the AIs will become better, and you don't need to take photos, actually, it's available at kirvaitis.net. The AIs will become better than humans at many jobs very soon. So prepare, learn about robotic process automation, which is a very, very simple form of AI, and predictive analytics, which is a little bit more complex, but very interesting. Learn to base your decisions on data, and it is happening today. Don't postpone that. And the third thing, and I think the most controversial, but this is what I really feel strongest about, teach your kids and grandkids knowledge-based programming and computational thinking, and learn it yourself as well. If a 12-year-old can do it, so can you. It's not hard, it's not Java, it's not PHP, it's not basic, it's very, very simple and really readable by humans. Try it. So yeah, links and reading lists are going to be available on kirvaitis.net, and also a few books and a few great interviews, which I think more people actually should go and listen to, or at least read. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Let's have a round of applause. Thank you, Aldi. I mean, a really fast-paced, high-energy run through everything that's happening at the moment. And you know, thinking back to my own children, I'm thinking, you know, what to do for them. So I think that's a really, really concrete takeaway from today as well. One of the things that you touched on was sort of the life cycle of companies, and also how some companies will simply not survive the conversion to digitalization, or even be able to compete with some of the big players. So you mentioned Taxify, TaxiLT, and Uber. One of the questions that we had from the audience during the previous presentation was, what about Apple? Will Apple die? Does it have an end of its own life cycle?
It is possible. I don't think that any companies are immortal. I surely hope that our generation, or at least the younger generation of people, will be immortal. I don't think that applies to corporate.
Okay. So there is an end in sight. And you mentioned also the driving license, not having the driving license, being a user, having that experience of the customer journey, the user experience, frictionless integration.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thinking about your own children, you say your youngest son is 4, 5?
Yeah, 4.5.
Okay, so will he ever see a day when he's allowed to have a driving license? Will driverless cars come in before then? What's your thought?
I think it's going to be a hobby, and whether he's going to be interested in that hobby, I very much doubt that, actually.
Okay, okay. And maybe just a question out for the audience as well. You know, again, these very, very strong messages about embracing digitalization, being ready for change, making that mental shift. Is there anybody in the room who's brave enough to put up their hand and say that my business or my industry, it's not possible to digitalize? Would anybody say that? That was half a hand. No, that's not. Okay, so there is then, I take from that, you know, a real understanding and a need for approaching this, adopting this, and moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aldi.